Hey guys, welcome back to another part. In this one, we're going to talk about lights in Unreal Engine and how they work, and I'll also display each individual type of lights in Unreal Engine and their settings that you need to be aware. Now, there are also a few key factors that can affect our lights, for instance, some atmosphere or some high fog, but I'll get into that a little bit later in this part. Now let's go into our Unreal Engine. This is where we have left off in the last part. We have scattered all our foliage onto our main map. Now, in this one, we're not going to be lighting our main scene, but instead, I want to create a new level to display how lights work. Now, you don't really have to follow along in creating this new level and placing down all the lights, but if you want to, feel free to follow along. That will help you learn a lot more as well. So let's actually save this level for now, and let's go to File, New Level, and create a basic level. Now here we don't really need this left panel over here, so if you go into our right and check the top right corner, you'll see maximizes or restores the viewport. Click on that, and now we have this full panel. But if you want to go back to 2 panel again, you just need to click this without having to go into the layouts. So I'm going to maximize this, and then let's bring in our blueprint for the church to visualize things a little bit better. Let's bring this down to our floor without having any gaps, just like that. And let's lower this down so we have a lot more space to work in. Now, before we do anything, let me demonstrate to you something in Unreal Engine. We have auto exposure for viewport. So for instance, right now we're outside of the church. If you go in, first of all, it will be dark, but slowly it will turn a little bit brighter because of the auto exposure. We technically don't want that because we want to see how things are as they are. So in order to fix this, let's go inside first. In order to fix this, go into this lit button over here, click on this, and we have game settings over here. Turn this off, and then we can change our exposure under here. So I'm going to leave it around -1.1. So if you go out, it will stay the same. If you go in, it will stay the same as well without automatically adjusting our lights. In Unreal Engine, we have 5 different lights. So to see those, go to Place Actors and click on the lights icon over here. Now you'll see all 5 different lights. First of all, we have a directional light. A directional light is basically just like a sunlight where you can rotate this around. It will cast shadows and light all over your map wherever you are. And you can rotate this around. You can change a few settings like intensity over here, light color. If you want something like a sunset, you can do that as well, like that. And you can rotate it using the gizmo. If you don't want to use the gizmo, what you can do is hold left control and L and move your mouse around until you find somewhere that you like for your sun, and release your buttons. Now I know left control and L is such a stretch for your hands, for your fingers. So if your mouse actually supports a standalone app where you can change keybinds, you can actually set some of your mouse buttons that are on the side of your mouse to control L, and you can just click on that to move around your sun. So we also have a few different settings that you can change in the directional light. We have use temperature as well. So if we use temperature, you can change how warm or cold your sun is by using this slider. Now we can also change if you want to cast shadow with the sun or not. And we can also change the indirect lighting intensity. So how much the lights are being bounced off of the ground and other stuff. And we also have volumetric scattering intensity, but I'll get into this a little bit later. Another thing we have is the source soft angle. We can change these two, source angle and source soft angle, we could change this to get different types of shadows. So for instance, if you change the source angle to 0, you'll have very sharp shadows, but if you change it to something high of a higher value, you'll have softer shadows like this. Now once you have changed source angle, you can now change the source soft angle, and it doesn't make much of a difference right now, but sometimes it will make some difference. But for this one, we're going to leave it around 3. Now if you go inside as well, this sun will be casting some light in through the window. So if I were to move the sun like this, you can actually see some light bounces onto here. Now, if you change your source angle to a soft shadow, you'll see some anti-aliasing issues. So that is something for you to be aware about. So let's actually move on to another type of light. So let's put this sun down just a tad like that, and we're gonna bring in our point light. Point light is basically like a sphere light. Imagine this as a sphere. It is casting all around this light, and you can change this intensity over here, and as you can see, it creates like a ball of light around here. With other lights, except from directional and skylight, we have attenuation radius. That is how much the light is being affected, how big of an area the light is affecting. So if I were to change this, you can see this outer circle getting bigger and smaller if you decrease the size. So if you want really bright light but only hit specific places, you can change this attenuation radius over here to cast upon just that area over there. And we also have a source radius over here to get some soft and harsh lights. Depends on the shadow. So I'll bring in one more mesh to see how it looks. So let's bring in this cross symbol over here. Put our light down, and we can change our source radius like this, and you can see how it is affecting our shadows over there. Now we can also use temperature to change the warmth and the coolness of our light, or we can just use a light color to adjust whatever light we want to use. Another thing is also the indirect lighting intensity. If you don't want the bounces, you can decrease this, but if you increase the indirect lighting intensity, as you can see, it gets a little bit more realistic where the lights are being bounced off. We also have a few advanced settings that you should know. For instance, if you have a specular item, so for instance, I think this might be a specular item. So let's bring this up. See if this is reflecting anything. So it is being reflected, the light is being reflected a little, and we can change this in our specular scale over here. Now you can see if you want this light source to be reflected through the specular or not over here, which is very, very convenient thing, because if you have water or anything on your scene and you put down some lights on top of the water, you'll see the actual source of the light instead of being casted all over the place. So sometimes it's good to have this turned off so that you don't really see the source of the light in the reflections. So that is one particular setting that you need to know. Another thing we have is the lighting channel. So the lighting channel basically is separating different assets and different lights into their own groups so that they only get affected by their own channel. So for instance, if I were to change this light to channel 1 and remove channel 0, and let's select this lamp over here, and let's go scroll down or we can just search for channel over here so that it's easier for us to see. Remove, we can still have the 0 because some of the lights will be, most of the lights, every light will be on 0. Sorry, that was what I was trying to say. Every light that you put down will be on channel 0. So if you don't want the environmental light, you can just turn off 0 as well, but we're going to leave 0 on, and we can turn on 1 as well. Now, this number 1 is affected onto our lamp as well. So we can iterate by using light channels as well, because sometimes we want to shine a specific light on specific objects, but we don't want it to be across every asset. So that is also another cool trick that you should know about. I think that is it for the point light. So let's bring in our spotlight. Like the name suggests, it is actually like an actual spotlight. We have this cone over here. Now, again, the same thing with the intensity, attenuation radius. But for this attenuation radius, it is not a ball. It is a cone that you can adjust and how much you want to spread this out. We can also adjust the inner cone angle and outer cone angle for different types of spotlight users. And we also have our source radius to change how sharp or blurry our shadows are. We can also adjust our use temperature again over here. We can adjust if we want to cast shadows. And we also have our indirect lighting intensity, which is also a cool thing. So all the settings will be similar to each other. It's just the way how lights are being shine on. So let's actually delete our spotlight. Another thing we have is a rectangular light. So unlike the point light, rectangular light is a rectangle that is emitting light from just one side of the rectangle. So as you can see over here, this is affecting just this side, but not this side. Again, with the same settings, we have intensity, color, attenuation radius. Now, what we have here now, instead of the source size, is the source width and height. So the bigger they are, they'll cast softer shadows like this, and the smaller they are, they'll cast harsher shadow like that. Another thing we have is, let's bring this a little bit bigger. We have this barn door angle, so we can adjust this to change the different effects of the lights. So right now it is not going everywhere across the rectangular, and it has some shadow angles that we have made with the barn door angle. We can also change this barn door length like this, so we can only shine on specific thing, and it's quite unique. Now let's change these back to default like that, and we can also use temperature over here. We can change if we want to cast shadows or not. Indirect lighting over here, and let's go into our events as well. We can change lighting channels over here as well. So that is for our rectangular light. Now every light will get affected by different stuff that you put in. For instance, we have our high fog, sky atmosphere, skylight, and volumetric cloud as well. So I'll explain a little bit deeper on everything in the next part, but let me go through these a little bit broadly in this part. So we have skylight over here. We have already put down one skylight by default under here. Now this is basically like a whole globe of light that is affecting the entire level. So if I were to turn this off, you can see right now just the directional light is affecting our scene. If we turn this off and turn on skylight, it will not affect much because it is using our directional light to reference how bright our environment is. So if I were to turn on directional light again and turn on sky atmosphere, sorry, I turned off sky atmosphere by accident. But as you can see, if we turn off directional light, it won't get affected. But if we turn back on directional light, it will get affected. And you can see if you turn off skylight, you can see the difference between the two. So the skylight can also help with our indirect bounces. So around here, if you notice, if I were to turn off skylight, there's no bounces and it will be pure black. But if you turn on skylight again, it will have some bounces. And some of the settings over here can be a little bit tricky. We don't really need to use it as much, all of these settings. Mostly we'll just be using directional light and high fog most of the time. But one thing that you should mess around with is the indirect lighting intensity. This can help us with some of the bounces a little bit, but right now it's not affecting our scene too much because nothing much is going on over here. One thing you should always turn on is the real-time capture, because without this, even if our directional light move, the sky light will stay the same. It's not quite noticeable here, but having a real-time capture is a good thing. Like you can see, it changes the bounces completely. And you can also change the light color as well. You can, if your sky is really blue, you can change this to blue and your bounces will be a little bit more blue. Now another thing we're going to use is not a it's a exponential high fog, sorry, and that is our fog distributed across our scene. So if you select this and search for volumetric, now you can enable volumetric fog, which is helping with how the lights react in the scene. And we can change our fog density around here, and we can change some of the stuff, like for instance fog in scattering color. So if you want to change the fog scattering color, you can see how it is being affected. So a lot of these settings you want to test out how they look and iterate according to your tastes, because these ones are very they're very specific into what they're doing. Explaining everything will take a lot of time, but we can light the scene together and you can learn a little bit more about these in the next part. Before we go there, let me show you what our volumetric fog can do. So right now we have this sun. It changes to around here where we can see we have this sun, and we can go into our directional light and we can change our volumetric scattering intensity to get some God rays that is apparent around where the shadow areas are. I don't know if you can see it, but we can boost it up by increasing our fog density. Now you can see it a little bit clearly, but if we go inside, maybe we can see it a little more clearly. So let's change our sun direction like that. Now you can see some rays through our sun over there. We can even increase this effect by searching, go to directional light, searching a bloom. So we can turn on light shaft bloom, and we can change the threshold like this, and you can see how much it is affecting our volumetrics over here. Now this works with every single light. So for instance, if I were to put down point light, and let's change our volumetric scattering intensity to about 4, and we can change it to more than 4 by just typing in it, and you can see how this is being affected. Now all of the sliders in Unreal Engine, even if it's at 4, you can still increase it more than the maximum limit by just typing in, but be careful of that. It can sometimes crash your Unreal Engine if there are settings that can crash your Unreal Engine. So Now this is our volumetric fog, which we're going to be using in our forest. Now the last and final thing for the light section is our sky atmosphere. Again, this is a little bit tricky to explain everything in detail, but I really recommend, especially with lights, since there is no right or wrong in setting up your lights, is to experiment with different settings and see what you like and remember those settings that you have tweaked. So we have I don't know how to pronounce this, maybe Rayleigh scattering. This you can change to different colors and it can give you different look. For instance, if you change into something like yellow or something, it looks like Mars or something out of space. But again, this color will affect your sunlight color as well. Right now it is completely white now. It's canceling out our yellow color of the sun. So in order to get back the yellow color, you need to change your directional light into a blue color. Now we also have our absorption. Now you can see what it is doing by playing around with this slider over here and change different settings. And we also have a few scattering scale over here. This is how much your how much your sky atmosphere is scattering upon it. So these are all the lights that you should know, but again, most of the settings you want to kind of play around with it because they have different types of look with different settings. So my advice is to play around with all these settings for now and then come back to the next part to actually light our main level. So I'll see you guys in the next part.